So Michael is a reader at the Center for Interaction Design. The Center for Interaction Design at the Edinburgh Napier University. He has worked in the field of human-computer interaction and interaction design since 1987. He also had interactive installation exhibited at conferences and art and design festivals. And finally, he's also the project coordinator for the UrbanIxD. Is that how you say it? Yes. Project which is a project that explores urban interaction design, and it's what you're going to talk about. So, we're listening to you.
Okay. Thank you. That's good. Rarely I get a round of applause before I actually say anything. It's usually just to stop. Okay, this morning what I want to do is talk a little bit about urban interaction design and what it is. So my name is Michael, and I work in a Centre for Interaction Design in a School of Computing. And maybe just to sort of put things into perspective a little bit, I'll start by telling you a story. Probably about 10 years ago, there was a visitor to the department that I work in. And he was going around to the various offices chatting to the staff, and he ended up in my office, and we were sitting talking, and I was explaining to him what I was interested in and the sort of work that I was doing. And just as he was leaving after our conversation, he turned to me and said, "Do you know, Michael, you should get out of the office more." And he left at that, and I was sort of left sitting in my office thinking, was he being funny, or was he making it? Sort of that thought stuck with me. And it was that was a moment when I began to, I suppose my focus and my interest in interaction moved from essentially the desktop out into the urban environment. And since then I've been exploring that with varying degrees of success and confusion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those things. But I'm going to start by talking about urban interaction design and what I think that is. And I suppose the place to start is thinking about interaction design. What is it? Quite a few of my colleagues and quite a few people that I meet ask me what is interaction design. And I suppose really the first attempt to try to characterize. Is there anybody actually here that would say they're an interaction designer? Oh, there's a few. I thought I was going to get away. I see there was nobody I could tell you anything. But anyway, so I better be a bit more careful and circumspect then. So Gillian Crampton Smyth in 2002 described it as shaping our everyday life through digital artifacts. And the second description down below is that idea of the practice of designing interactive digital products, environments, systems, and services. And I suppose in my own mind, the first description is much more of at a conceptual level, whereas the second one is more about the practice of everyday interaction design. And I think the word everyday stuck with me, and I think that was something which I felt was really important in terms of the way we lead our lives and the rituals and the patterns that we go through, and how our relationship with objects and services and products sort of alter and change and impact on how we lead our lives and the patterns that we exhibit in our daily lives. So that's sort of every day. I'm sort of quite fascinated by the mundane and the things that we do in an unthinking way, the habits and the rituals that we all have that help us deal with the complexity of life. So, interaction design, one of the things that really drew me to interaction design as a subject was that it takes a very a design-led approach. And as a consequence of that, has got this focus on how things might be rather than how they are. And that as a researcher in the area, that's always a much more an interesting horizon to look toward. The description of interaction design describes it very much more. It's more than interaction. The interactive experience is more than just a push of a button or the click of a mouse or the movement of a finger. somebody told me the story one time about a moment when he found an LP, an album in a shop which he'd been looking for years. And he could describe that moment of elation of, is that the one, is it the one I want? And he was flicking through all of the records and he found it. And he said nobody will ever have that will be able to tell that story in the future that they found something on Amazon or they found something on Discogs or something like that. The online experience is very different from the sort of the physicality of being in the shop and being present at the point of interaction. So, Branko Lukic wrote a book in, I think it's 2011, called Non-Object. And it's a book that I would really recommend. It's a book, he's a product designer originally from Serbia. And it's a book of objects that don't exist. They're speculative objects that could exist potentially in the future or the near future. And he described in the introduction his sort of concept as and where his interests lie is the space between the object and the user. And I think that really sort of echoed with me in terms of how interaction has moved away from the sort of the point of interaction as when I started looking at the area to a much more sort of holistic experience. So I think that's the sort of area that I'm interested in, that space between objects and people, and subsequently people in cities, and the myriad of different objects and devices and services that we interact with on a daily basis. That space has become increasingly complex and increasingly larger and more fluid and distributed. And it's filled with data streams from all types of sources. And with that, it brings its own sort of level of complexity and challenge for us. This is an image that I took. The last time I was in Brussels, I took this picture. Just the wealth of different pieces of information and media, from the sort of the sort of digital graffiti to the sort of normal graffiti to the statue to the guy with the headphones and the camera. So there's so many different things going on, and I felt that sort of image captures, in a way, this complexity, the way that we deal with and the way that we interact with this ensemble of different devices and different settings, and how we navigate and deal with these data streams. And I think, for me, urban interaction design, which is, I suppose, what I would say a force where my interests lie at the moment, is a response to this escalation. This is a picture which I took. This is a shop window in Budapest. And I was just overcome with, I couldn't work out, what the shop was selling, everything. But somebody had obviously gone quite carefully and thoughtfully had decided to design the facade of this particular shop. The colours were in a particular way, but still it seemed to sort of somehow capture this complexity and richness and opportunity and challenge and all of these things that I feel that urban interaction design is really trying to grapple with. And from the sublime, I suppose, to the ridiculous, this is a drawing which I did one morning for somebody. I was trying to explain what it is I do. There's even a typo in it, or a spelling mistake. How old school is that? And I was saying that, I think interaction design is interested in this space between people and cities. And cities now are being characterized by the increase of sensors and so much more technology within the city that we are, some of which we're aware of, others we're not aware of. People are carrying more and more devices with them, or more powerful devices. So all of these things lead to this complexity and sort of messiness. And that design space is where I guess urban interaction design is focused on. And particularly, I would say that it's that issue of how we derive meaning and how these how we derive meaning from data, and how these meanings inform our subsequent decisions and how the decisions that we make about life. And that's really about urban interaction design. Our ability to derive meaning from data is through interaction. And I would say that that's, in essence, that's really what urban interaction design is about. It's making sense and trying to navigate these different streams of information using multiple devices, and through that interaction, enabling us to derive meaning, which we then make decisions upon, or not, depending on what we're doing. So, dashboards have become very sort of current. This is the dashboard for London, and there's lots of data. That's undeniable. So we have this sort of spectrum from smart cities to operating cities for operating systems for cities to city dashboards. Lots of data, but what does it actually mean? What do these numbers mean for us as an individual? Okay, so all the services are good, but what is, 9,080 bikes are available? Is that a lot? Is it not? Who knows? Sometimes we have this sort of fetishization of data. We believe that more data enables us to make better decisions, but that's not always the case. What actually data means is sometimes unclear. And we have this other things are like sort of CityMart is an interesting website, and that's about trying to share apps for cities, so that say an application or an app that's designed for Barcelona could be adapted and run in another city. But it has interesting implications in terms of, does one app work for one city and not for another? It raises questions about sort of globalization of city solutions. Is there such a thing? Cities are very much, they have their own identity, they have their own feel. We've all been here in Brussels for a few days, and we get a sense of what the city's like at a certain time in its history, a certain time in what's going on. But cities have their own particular personality, and that's made by the people as well. Here's the other end of the spectrum. You've got the sort of apps for hipsters. This is one which I like in a way, and this is an app which allows you to find sunny pubs in London, and it basically mashes up different data streams and allows you to find out at a particular time in the day where a sunny pub will be, so you can go and sit outside and have a drink. And as I say, they say it's hacked together as an experiment, and they say all of these Foursquare, OpenStreet data, map data, lots of Java, and complicated maths in their own words. But I would say that, both of these examples, what these things have in common so far is data and interaction. It's through interaction with that data that we begin to derive meaning. Now, this is an interesting experiment. It's an interesting sort of idea, but it's not going to solve cities. It's not going to solve problems. And indeed, as I'll say in a moment, whether we need to solve cities is another matter. At the other side of the coin, now those were all sort of services on various sort of devices and tablets and whatever. We have this proliferation of screens and projections. This is an image that I took in Manchester. It's using sofas as a means of like Tetris, and these sort of filled up the space gradually. And I thought it was sort of a mildly amusing advert. But I would say that these things are maybe they're indicators of possibility, but it's also a sign that things need to get better. I become disturbed. At our university, we seem to put screens everywhere. Every space, there has to be a screen, or there has to be some information or signage or something. And that can be there are times when I look at screens and I'm not sure whether I'm looking at an advert or I'm looking at information that I should be trying to relate to. Particularly airports are examples of that, where you can find yourself looking at a screen and wondering, is this something which should be pertinent to me, or is it part of an advert, or is it whatever? So these are indicators, as I say, of possibility, but they're also indicators that, for all of us, that things do need to get better. This is an interesting object that's appeared in the last few months in Edinburgh. This is a cycle counter. And you think, on the face of it, you think, oh, that's sort of quite interesting. But it raises questions of, what do these numbers mean? 512 cyclists have passed here. Is that good? Is that bad? Should it be more? Should it be less? It's just data, numbers, sort of untethered to from meaning. And as a sort of viewer or interpreter of this data, it's questionable what I can draw from that, what inference that I can make from that. Also, there's the question of who owns that data. Who's going to use that data? It's the city council in this instance. But what that means, will it mean changing, encouraging the use of bicycles in the city, or having more of these things? Well, nobody really knows. But it's there. And it's sitting, counting the number of cyclists. So, what purpose? Who knows? Another one, sort of a physical object. These are quite interesting. This is a bus shelter by a company called JC Deco. And what they're doing is looking at cities and finding places where seating can be deployed or bus shelters need to be positioned. And they're doing that for city councils. And city councils are keen to encourage them to do that. But what they're also looking at, this is a company that obviously is founded on advertising, is that they're using these things to advertise to us as we sit at the bus stop or whatever. So with near-field technology, they can stream advertising to us. And this raises questions of the commercialization of the physical environment, and that creeping phenomena, which is gradually taking over, well, not taking, but it's gradually beginning to encroach on many of our cities. And I would say, if you think about these objects are more our physical objects, the ones were previous, but these things are running in parallel, but they're not really at the same stage of development. So not everything is at the same stage of readiness. These devices are very much lagging behind. Technology runs at a different pace. It's much easier and much more rapid to deploy software or applications in, like the sunny pubs in London. It's much quicker to distribute those than it is to deploy physical objects in the environment. So we've got to be aware of the different pace that things run at, from the massive sort of infrastructure projects across cities through to specific buildings, through to software. Things run at different paces. I think Adam Greenfield talks about urban stacks. Stacks was one of the things that people mentioned, some of the speakers talked about yesterday. And that's acknowledging that there is this disparity in pace of development, and that not everything, as I say, is at that same stage of readiness. So, I guess I would argue that cities aren't problems to be solved. Cities are there for people. They enable and they sustain us. They provide a rich source of urban life. People are drawn to cities not because of the architecture per se. It's normally for work or for family or for, well, a whole host of different reasons. And they're very much a sort of an organism as opposed to a machine. They're not something that there should be a specific operating system for. They're not something that they should be designed in a particular way. They're very much an evolving thing. And I think that is really sort of central to urban interaction design, is acknowledging and explicitly acknowledging that it's people that make cities. It's you and I that make cities smart. We're the the core of what makes a city, I would say. Okay, so a little bit about this project. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the UrbanIxD project, and then describe. We ran a summer school last year, and I want to describe some of the outputs from that summer school and some of the themes that came out of that, primarily just to act as sort of a catalyst for thought for yourselves, something food for thought. Some of the things that you might like to explore or think about in the work that you're going to do in the next week. So, urban interaction design is funded by the EU Future and Emerging Technologies Initiative. So it's funded under FET. So key words are future and emerging and technology, which is very much obviously our focus. The project itself has partners in Edinburgh, where I'm based, the University of Aarhus in Denmark, Telecom Italia in Italy, and the University of Split in Croatia. So we're a small 2-year project, so we're not going to solve the world. We're not even going to solve a city. We're not even going to solve part of a city. But our focus is on this sort of emerging field of urban interaction design and the public space and its relationships between people, and how those relationships work with and through technology, and how data is important in that. The data is effectively the currency of those interactions. So that's really that's the focus of the project. And one of the other things we're doing is working towards what I refer to as a research manifesto. It's a coordination action. Okay, so I suppose what that means is we're doing some work to convince the European Union that this is a valid area for future research. That's really the bottom line of the project. And the way that we're doing that is by trying to sort of set that agenda, but also build a research network, build people like yourselves, give a center to that, or a focus for people whose research chimes and echoes with this concept of urban interaction design. And part of that process was the summer school, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And again, because I think back to my background in interaction design, we've adopted a very explicitly sort of design-inspired method for exploring, what interaction might be. It's very difficult to talk about what the future might be. Yeah, we all might have jetpacks and flying cars and all of those sort of things, but sometimes you need to sort of ground these ideas in something more tangible. And through those sort of speculations, dialogue is encouraged, debate begins, communities form. That was the plan. In the office, it seemed all sensible at the time when I was writing the proposal. And we're also, as well as building a community, what we want to do is raise public awareness. Try to convey to the public in general what this might mean. What will these technologies that are beginning to creep into our cities, what will they mean? Who will own them? How will they change our lives? In what way, what services will be provided for us that we know that we don't have? And what will that mean for us? The project itself is very much grounded in the social and the human. We have this sort of bottom-up approach, and that's, I suppose, it's that point of contact between the sort of systemic solutions that are familiar to all of us in the dialogues that surround the smart city concept, and trying to sort of look at the sort of the contact points from the bottom up. So we're excited as a project. I think we're excited with what you can do with data. And we take the view that cities of the future will contain this sort of complex mesh of interconnected systems. And mess and complexity will be the background context. And I think that was echoed in the sentiment of Mark Shepard's talk last night. that this is the backdrop in which we work. Cities are inherently messy. But yet it's that mess that actually is the thing that appeals at times. It's the thing that perplexes, but also intrigues. So, thinking and doing. That was another comment from yesterday, which I like. I like thinking and doing. Not at the same time, obviously, because I can't cope with that. So the project, I would say, is about thinking, okay? So we're building this landscape, we're writing a research manifesto, there's various, go to the website, blah, 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 blah. There's lots of documents and things that we're writing. We're trying to write them in a way which are generally accessible. How successful we are is another matter. But it's also about doing, okay? People congregate, collect around activities. That's why you guys are here at the moment. You're going to be working together with people that you haven't worked with, from people with different disciplines. You're going to learn from one another. You're going to build a community. You're going to build a sense of shared experience. So one of the things we did, and this is what I'm going to talk about for the remainder of the presentation, is run this summer school last year in Croatia. Yeah, right, okay. This is where the project, the summer school adopted this explicitly critical design methodology. We wanted to explore how critical design could enable a multidisciplinary group of people to work together, to ask questions. The critical design, I suppose, is well, let's say, I've got to go to the source. It's a catalyst or provocation for thought. Okay? It's about using design as a means of thinking about future possibilities. It's not saying that this is the way something will be. It's saying this is a possibility. It's the way something might be. But in the discussion that ensues around that, we begin to reflect on what's important to us today. And it's only really when you engage in that sort of dialogue that you begin to tease out some of the things that are important to us. And it also echoes that sort of deliberately forward-looking emphasis of interaction design, and ticks the F box of FET, which was future. So we didn't really know whether this would work or whether it would work in the way that we envisaged. But, well, I'll let you consider and reflect upon that in a moment. And what follows are a series of design fictions. So these are, I suppose, fictional stories and films and ideas of possibility. And each one sort of explores some aspect of what it might be like to live in this hybrid city of the future. And the key thing about, I think, design fictions is that they seek to activate imagination. Rather than making specific technological claims or making claims about the future, they start conversations. The act of making the thing was as important as the final output, and the dialogue that went around. And obviously, the fictions that I'm going to show you are part of a longer process. So the summer school lasted for 8 days. There were 40 participants, and each participant was divided into one of 4 atelier groups. So there were speakers there who came and did the sort of, here's some ideas, think about that. There were atelier leaders. Tobias was one of the atelier leaders. Some of the guys here were participants at the summer school. So it was, it was a big event. And what you see, well, and what you're going to see in a moment, are some of the outputs from that. But bear in mind that they're only they're the sort of end point, and they don't really reflect the breadth of the conversation that went along, that led to the final film. Now, what I've tried to do is divide these into a number of categories. And I think I've called the first one the quantified self. And what I meant by that is that we're living in this world where, everything is measured and crowdsourced opinion holds sway. And that raises a question about how do we trust our own judgment? You know, when suddenly everything is measured and we're all looking at TripAdvisor and we're all going, you know, TripAdvisor is a classic example of you can always find a bad review. No matter where you're going to stay, there's always somebody who goes, tiles were crap. And, you know, I love looking through TripAdvisor, people photographing themselves in the hotel room. That's my particular sort of fascination with TripAdvisor. But I mean, it's a serious point. Everything seems to be measured. You know, how many friends do you have on Facebook? What's your clout score? What's this? What's that? And it's like, you know, too much. So you end up sort of questioning your own judgment and trust. And what does this actually mean for the creation and consumption of personal data? What value do we place on data? And Neil's talked a little bit about that yesterday. I think value is really interesting about when does data become valuable, when is it valuable, what value do we place on things. So that was that notion of the quantified self. In the future, where everything is measured and all our performance is scored, how do we trust our own judgment? So the first fiction is a thing called the Techno-Shaman. And this is a fiction that speculates that we'll outsource these decisions to the advice of digital data diagnosticians. I practice saying that. I'm not going to say it again. Who come from this sort of pre-data dependent age, and people who are able to see meaning when we're overwhelmed with data. And the idea was that these techno-shamans will be able to look at our devices and somehow weigh the data, make a judgment as to what's the value of the data that's contained in these devices. And it questions this notion of, you know, what is value and what is important to us, and will we lose things? And if we lose things, are they on other devices and things like that? And it's about sort of questioning what lies between the bits and the bytes contained in devices. And it was an idea which it sort of was very much rooted in this idea of the quantified self, where data is everything, but maybe meaning is a much more ephemeral thing and a more obviously a more personal thing. The second example is one called Fabrica Split. What it explores is this sort of notion of how we present digital content, and they were interested in how we do that in a public sense. They were interested in rituals as well, and the way that the rituals that build up around smartphone usage. And we all see that now. 10 years ago, if you walk towards somebody and they're talking to themselves, you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to let this person go by, and I'm not going to get eye-to-eye contact. But no, it's everywhere. And you know that everybody's connecting, they're talking away. Are they talking to themselves? Are they talking to somebody else? Where are they conceptually? All of these things we're sort of dealing with that. And we're working out, you know, what are the social norms. So, as I say, this piece was looking at the sort of urban rituals. And the way that some devices, as Katja said yesterday, it's sort of this notion of devices which divide or devices which assemble. What are things which draw us together, or what are the things that set us apart? The third in this sort of series of the quantified self is a short film, and it's based on this Aura City, and this is one of the pieces that came out of Tobias's group. And it's sort of the idea behind this is when everybody's connected, how do we share really important and personal data, and who do we share that with, and how do we make choices about who we share that with? And what it's doing is exploring the notion of eye-to-eye contact and the importance of touch and the importance of proximity when we share personal data. So I'll maybe just play the film. As I say, this is one of the outputs from the school.
How are you? How did you do last night? Tell me everything, please.
I was on a date with a guy.
Ma con chi? Dove l'hai conosciuto?
Remember last week when I met the blonde guy, architect?
Certo, come no?
Well, he asked me out. I was with him last night.
E che cosa avete fatto?
You do wanna see?
It's a really handsome guy.
Yes, we went on the beach, grabbed pizza and beers. It was really romantic. Well, it was a hotel, of course.
Addirittura.
Yes.
E che è successo in hotel? Raccontami un po'.
Well, if you really want to know, here it goes.
Really? Did you fake it again?
So in the future, some things never change. Okay, so the second sort of group of design fictions are sort of notionally based around this idea of negotiation of space. And one of the discussions which permeated a lot of the work in the summer school was this issue of, in the future, if space becomes more of a premium, what choices will we make in terms of how we access that space and use that space and subsequently experience the city? So the first one was, an app based around this notion of Cuba, which is the coordination of urban busy areas. And the idea was that the context of the summer school was Split, which is very much a town based on tourism. So the focus of the tourist season lasts for probably about about 9 months in Split. So there's a question of how do local people, they need tourists and they acknowledge that it's important that the tourists are there, but how do they share that space with those people? And this was an app which sought to explore this notion of balance. So maybe rather than sitting in the best square in the city, the locals would agree to, during the tourist season, sit in maybe the slightly more shaded square, the slightly less tourist-orientated one, so that the tourists could experience the city. And it raised sort of interesting issues in terms of, negotiation of space and the fact that we all make choices, we all make decisions, but what motivate those decisions in how we use cities. The second one, and again it's a short film, is looking at this notion of a gift economy. And what they did was explore a situation where you have to, in order to live or participate or indeed be in the city, you need to do some activity or do something which will support that community. So I'll play the film. Here we go.
The Nocuna Zone, a protected region of the displaced city that operates a gift economy. Life and infrastructure in Nocuna is sustained by a crowdsourced task system. City walls have been painted smart electronic white. This enables citizens to interact with the city's exclusive technological interfaces. Money is banned from Nocuna, and the periphery is specially equipped with an automatic signal blocking technology that disables the use of universal Bitcoin.
Download completed. Hello, Sam. Please follow the arrows to the digital wall for your entry task. Thank you for uploading the following task. Water the urban garden. Gardening selected. When the task has been completed, you would have 15 minutes to stay in Nakuna. If you want to stay longer, you need to solve more tasks for the community. If you don't, you will be escorted to the exit. Thank you, Sam. You may now visit Nakuna for 30 minutes and enjoy a cup of coffee. You are running out of time. Completed.
Okay. So it does, as I say, what's happened? It raises sort of interesting issues in terms of the light and the dark and the positive side and possibly the dystopic side as well. So the final, I suppose, categorization is this notion of experiencing the other. And it's what I mean by that is that sort of layers of data potentially can build up over time. And what does that mean when we explore that? You know, if we reveal these data seams and navigate through this sort of future city, potentially there are alternative experiences and times and places and people that we can connect with. You know, one of the pieces, which some of the guys were involved with, was one called Backspace, and that was a fiction which speculates about an explorer, effectively an urban explorer, who seeks out these seams of data and tries to reveal and celebrate the experiences that can be found in this data that's long since been forgotten, which are somehow sort of echoes and connections back to the past. The device, the idea was a backpack where the wearer could both reveal these seams but also leave stories of their own. So it's about sort of layering stories and connecting stories to places, moments in time, you know, fragments of time, which are fragments of data which can be connected to time. This film is about, I suppose, a similar sort of thing. And it's looking at how these stories might be revealed and how cities play an important part. The fabric of cities play an important part in both collecting these stories and indeed sometimes protecting us as well. Let's see if the sound's sometimes a bit low on this one. I'll put it up.
The age of the smart city. Digital data is collected, processed and utilised to optimise. Privacy amongst residents is maintained through the rare art of conversation, an analog form of data that cannot be detected or processed by the smart city's digital sensors. Friends and family from splits share their personal thoughts within the closed walls of intimate spaces, their own home, a friend's lounge room, a favourite cafe. These thoughts, dreams, aspirations for a better future are unheard by the smart city. The bricks and mortar of the city are the caretakers of these citizens, watching over them as they meet to converse, capturing the stories exchanged in its walls, oral prints of words unheard. A young boy lives in the city during these times. Each day and night she roams the streets, peering into the windows of these intimate spaces to see how people live their lives, hoping to catch glimpses of the stories they would share. She senses that the city is full of lost and unheard aspirations. In a local flea market, the voyeur purchases an old military communication device and extends its listening capabilities to tune into the frequencies of oral prints. Wearing the device, she is able to virtually travel to all corners of the city and hear fragments of the unheard hopes and aspirations of citizens embedded in its walls.
You know, all the people just have to move out because there are a lot of buildings.
Write the book.
You wouldn't believe, but I also write it.
Oh, I do it.
And
It's for fun.
it's become boring. This is just repeating one same thing.
But I would definitely change the scene.
Okay. The final clip that I want to show in this sequence is one which explores the idea of memory and how memories might be shared and how memories might be experienced in the future. And this notion of mixing reality and fiction or other realities, and what that might mean for us in terms of how we again experience the places that constitute the city. So it questions as I say, the price of many memories and what that might mean for us in terms of memories that are scarce and become scarce, or ones which we all want to experience in some way or other. So I think a sort of an overall message, and one of the things that a theme which came out of the work is this sort of notion, the dichotomy of a city that monitors versus a city that shelters. Both are equally applicable depending on the situation that you're in or the circumstances that you find yourself. And it echoes back, as I say, this idea that cities aren't something to be solved, but there are questions that are within that dichotomy. And that's the next phase of our work is exploring this in an exhibition which we're running, an exhibition and symposium which the project is running in Venice in September. So the exhibition will comprise of some of the work of the summer school, which has been developed over the course of the intervening months, but also some specific pieces as well, which we've sourced for the exhibition. And there will be a one-day symposium as well, so you're all very welcome to participate and be there. I'm going to leave you with one final slide. And this is one which I really like. And it sort of raises the question about what value do we place on data. And this is a fridge which appeared in the athletes' village at the recent Winter Olympics in Sochi. And it's a beer fridge by the company Molson. And what's interesting about this fridge is that you can only open it if you're Canadian. No other people can open the fridge to get the free beer. And the way that you open it is by scanning your passport. And it will check if you're Canadian, and if you're Canadian, the fridge will open. And I think it does raise interesting issues as to what price we'll put on our own personal data and what we'll give away for what. So, thank you for your attention, and any questions, I guess.
Anyone?
Early in the morning.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh. You can let me away easily?
You never know if it's a good sign or a bad sign.
Do you know, I'll take it as a good sign that I've been incredibly articulate and very clear in all the concepts that I've talked about. There's always one. The man at the back has a question.
Michael, thanks very much for your talk. I'd like to know a little bit more about, the summer school, the workshop you did, particularly the structure of each of the groups, and a little bit about their kind of skill set going in and coming out. So, we saw these videos which were produced in a very short period of time, and also little bits of physical computing, electronics, and a little bit of magic. So
yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the process by which these videos were produced and how the groups were organized?
Okay. I've sort of deliberately skirted around that because I didn't really, in a way, because you guys are here to do something quite sort of similar in a way. But as I said, there were 40 participants. The skill sets ranged from at one end, I suppose, anthropologists through to media designers, through to architects, through to interaction designers, through to product designers. There was a real range of different disciplines. The sort of experience that the people had and the participants had, again, ranged from sort of PhD level through to early career researcher, through to working in practices. It was a quite sort of inspiring group of people to be with. They'd come from all over the world. People had traveled from Australia, North America, India to participate in the summer school. I think maybe what I want to emphasize is critical. No, none of the participants had experience of using critical design, using design as a means of thinking about the future and speculating about possibility. And I think that was a challenge for a lot of the participants to really sort of let go of their own sort of subject disciplines in a way and explore possibilities. So we tried to set it up in such a way that that opportunity was there. They had the freedom to do things that they wouldn't normally have in their everyday, working worlds. And we divided the 40 participants into 4 atelier groups. And each of those atelier groups had a leader. Tobias was one of the leaders of one of the groups. We had a guy, Carlos Lorenta from New York, came over. Chris Hand, who's now based in India, led another group. And Goran Savicevic led the 4th group. And each of those guys brought their particular expertise to the group. But they were there mainly as a sort of facilitators and, to try and help people through those moments of sort of the depth of despondency that they hit midway through. And we had speakers and showed stuff as well as a means of sort of just generating ideas. But I think critical design and there was a sort of pivotal moment when one of the speakers, Nicholas Nova, presented, I think, and he talked about his work with industry and commerce, and he's quite near to market in a lot of his work, and he explained how these ideas can be translated into a language and into I suppose a language which is maybe understandable and more accessible to people who are actually working in the here and the now, whereas some of the other ideas were much more sort of future orientated and possibly could be seen as sort of being untethered from the sort of the realities of day-to-day life. And I think that was a pivotal moment for a lot of the groups, and they began to, I guess, focus on this notion of fictions and speculations as a means of somehow trying to capture and articulate the ideas that they'd been discussing as part of their groups. And I think they were. I'm every time I watch this, I'm sort of really impressed by what they've done. And now the ideas are. It's just about trying to encourage dialogue and debate and discussion. And I think so far they've been successful in that respect. And I think a number. What's been rewarding is a lot of the participants in the summer school continue to work with one another. They continue to present their work, like Niels is here today. They present their work, they're collaborating on future projects. So that moment has brought people together, but also has formed a community, which is a really essential part of the overall project. And I think working together and events such as this and summer schools give you that opportunity to explore ideas which maybe you don't normally get, to pick up ideas, to soak up the experience and knowledge of other participants is always so important. And it's those things that, as I said to them at the time, it's what you do in these things sort of, I suppose, get you through those dark winter nights when all your ideas are rubbish and you're just sitting there surrounded by crap thinking, oh my God, I can't understand anything. And you sort of have to think back to those moments, and they sort of keep you going. And it's the same for us all. It's I guess that's why we're all here and we're all at events like this and why we support them so much. It gives you a flavour of what happened.
Another question?
Hold on. Oh, hold on. You're going to get a mic.
Did you get all the 40 participants? Was there a call out there? Or?
Yes. We put out a call. Okay, the story behind this, and I can tell you, Eve, was he back? Oh, he is, yes, in the back there. Yeah, Yves was one of our reviewers. The last time I saw Yves, he's not going to be a reviewer this year, but he was on the other side. So he's poacher turned gamekeeper, or gamekeeper turned poacher. So when we were writing the proposal, the European Union asked the same question: how many people did you expect at the summer school? And suddenly you're forced in making up a number. And my immediate reaction is that make a number up which you feel you can achieve and which will be acceptable to the European Union. So I said 50. I expected 50 applications. And I thought, if we get 60 applications, brilliant. We ended up with over 200 applications for the summer school, which was amazing. And then horrifying within about 5 seconds, because we had to make really difficult decisions about who would be there. And we spent a lot of time as a project, unexpected time, having to sort of sift through and really make decisions based on the statements that the participants or the people had actually provided for us. So, yeah, I think, to be honest, I think the subject matter and the idea of the summer school really appealed. It chimed with a lot of ideas that were bubbling around in people's heads, and it was an interesting prospect, I think, and that's what appealed to so many people, and that's why we ended up with so many applicants. And at the end, ended up with 40 participants who were, really experienced and knowledgeable and passionate and all of those sort of things, and demanding. And what made the event so important, I think, in the lifetime of the project, but also made it so much more hard work in a good way for us as organisers. So suddenly more responsibility, but hey, somebody's got to work out where the toilets are and why they're not working. That was my job.
Anyone?
Hi. I have a slightly irritating philosophical question.
Okay.
And I apologise for
That's all right. Hey.
I noticed that you use the term the quantified self, which to me denotes a kind of self that has already been quantified, that, that process has been completed.
Mm-hmm.
But much of the work that you showed, and particularly the stuff from the summer school, points towards a sense of possibility, of future, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that focused on the parts of subjectivity that escape a data revolution, the conversation, sort of secrets, experiences, those moments. And so my question is, why the quantified self instead of the quantifiable self? Do you think something can exist outside?
Well, okay, I'll fess up at this point. The terms that I've used to try and sort of categorize some of the fictions we're still debating these as a group. And yeah, I take your point about, trying to build on this notion of a more sort of future orientated and yeah, maybe quantified self, or was it quantifiable self? Did you say? Yeah, maybe quantifiable is maybe a more appropriate way of describing it. But I think what I was trying to grapple with was the idea of so much things can be, so many things in the future, and even in the present we quantify. From people putting up, information about how they've run, how fast they've run, where they've run with these sort of wearable technologies which are now very popular, through to, what that might mean in terms of value. I was trying to sort of tease out some of those ideas. But yeah, maybe it is maybe as I say, the terms that we're using are still loose. So maybe what you say, yeah, it's more a sort of aspiration, and it chimes more readily with the nature of the work. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That wasn't annoying.
Is there a last question, maybe?
Oh, excellent. See, once you get going, that's it.
It's between a question and a reaction. I was struck by the touch, the hands, that kept all along a role important.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw the image of the man touching the wall with his hands, I couldn't think about the prehistorical caves and the first experience of identifying as a human being by that image of the hand on the wall.
Yeah.
So the topic of the touch, the hand, seems to be important in...
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely I would agree that one of the things that I'm always very reticent about making predictions in the future, but one of the things that I'm sort of slightly more confident about is the fact that in the future people will still be the same. You know, they'll still have the same hopes and dreams and fears, and they'll still have those basic needs of, as I say, of shelter and touch and community and all of these things. And I think touch, it's interesting that you've identified that, because it is that sort of essential proximity. Touch is something which has a sense of danger with it as well, because when you touch something, you can both be harmed by it, but also nurtured by it as well. So there's a real, I think touch is an important way that we communicate, and that we need that proximity. And it was interesting in a number of the pieces that was used as a means of interaction, but it was also used as a means of sharing personal things, that proximity, that eye-to-eye contact, that ability to be close to somebody emotionally and physically is necessary, and that will always be the case, I hope. Thank you.